Welcome to Echoes of Ancient Minds, where the world's most dangerous, forgotten, and overlooked philosophies come back to life. Every video, we dig up an idea history tried to bury and ask what it still has to teach us today. For most of ancient Indian history, deep philosophical and spiritual knowledge was tightly controlled, gate-kept by priestly elites, taught in Sanskrit, a language most ordinary people couldn't read or speak, and largely closed off to anyone outside a narrow social and educational class. Then, starting roughly 1,000 years ago and building over centuries, a sweeping philosophical and spiritual movement emerged that quietly broke that entire system open. It's called the Bhakti movement, and its core idea was almost dangerously simple. Direct, personal devotion could matter more than ritual, caste, or scholarly Sanskrit learning. This movement didn't emerge from a single founder or a single moment. It built up gradually across different regions of India through a long line of poet-philosophers, many of whom came from outside the traditional priestly classes entirely. Weavers, cobblers, women, people from castes excluded from formal religious education, voices that the existing philosophical establishment had largely shut out, became some of the movement's most influential figures. Claim cut directly against the existing religious hierarchy. A sincere, personal, emotional relationship with the divine didn't require elaborate Sanskrit ritual, priestly mediation, or caste privilege. It could be expressed in regional languages through poetry, song, and direct personal experience, accessible to anyone, regardless of social status or formal education. This was genuinely radical for its time, and it's worth being precise about why. Ancient and medieval Indian religious authority had been built, in significant part, on controlling access to sacred language and ritual knowledge. If liberation, or a meaningful connection to the divine, was available to anyone through direct devotion rather than through priestly mediated ritual, the entire structure of religious authority and social hierarchy built around that mediation came under direct philosophical pressure. Several Bhakti poet-philosophers built substantial followings specifically by challenging caste restrictions directly in their work, arguing, in various ways, that devotion and spiritual worth weren't determined by birth or social position. Some of the movement's most famous voices belonged to people from marginalized communities whose work survived and spread precisely because it resonated so powerfully with audiences who had been excluded from more elite philosophical and religious traditions. The movement also produced a massive body of vernacular literature, poetry and song composed in regional languages rather than Sanskrit, which had a profound, lasting cultural effect. It helped establish many of India's regional languages as serious vehicles for philosophical and spiritual expression, not just everyday communication, reshaping the linguistic landscape of Indian religious and literary culture for centuries afterward. It's worth noting that the Bhakti movement wasn't a single unified philosophy. It contained significant internal diversity, ranging from traditions emphasizing a personal, even intimate relationship with a specific divine figure, to traditions leaning toward broader, more abstract, non-dual philosophical positions about the nature of reality and the divine. What unified the movement wasn't a single doctrine, but a shared insistence that direct devotional experience mattered more than institutional gatekeeping. This had lasting institutional consequences. Temples, religious practices, and entire regional religious cultures across India were shaped by Bhakti movement ideas, and its influence on later Indian social and religious reform movements, including some directly engaging with caste critique, runs remarkably deep into more recent history. So here's what's worth sitting with. A movement built on the radical idea that direct personal experience could outweigh institutional authority managed to reshape religious and philosophical life across an entire subcontinent over centuries, often led by exactly the people the existing system had tried hardest to exclude. Some of history's most influential philosophical shifts came not from elite institutions, but from voices those institutions had deliberately shut out. Let me know what you think in the comments. That's Echoes of Ancient Minds, uncovering the philosophy's history almost erased. If this kind of forgotten wisdom is your thing, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.